Welcome to Technology Trends. I'm your host, Patrick Bailey. The title of our program today is Divination and the Goddess Traditions, and we have with us as our very special guest, Michael Tsarion. Michael is a divination scholar and sidereal mythologist. And Michael, those are pretty esoteric sounding titles. With these titles, what prompted you to come and work in this field in the Bay Area, known for its high technology and high science climate?
That's a good point, and as we do know, this is the center of the new technology and the new paradigms and cutting edge, the Silicon Revolution, or what have you. But Bay Area is a fascinating place because it also is a place where seemingly divergent technologies come together. You know, I specialize in ancient science, ancient technology, and there is, as a backdrop to all of the modernity, the concepts that are cropping up in modernity, there is the backdrop of the occult and the metaphysical traditions right here in the Bay Area. And the new scientists and the people behind those paradigms understand that it's both looking forward, but there's also a balancing, is to look back to our forefathers and to where we've come from. This is something that is famous in the Bay Area. It's sort of the backdrop of what is taking place here. And the ancient science is, in my opinion, the new science is ancient science, because our forefathers had their concept of the universe, their concept of cosmology, and their concept of being. We're starting to revisit in the 21st century. I think we're trying to revisit some of the concepts that they were familiar with.
So we're going to be talking tonight about ancient technology rather than current technology.
Well, that's right. I mean, look at the internet. I do a lot of my work. I've created an online taroscopic mystery school, which is dedicated to studying the divination arts, to the research and advancement of the divination arts, which are tarot, astrology, numerology, and Kabbalah. These are ancient sciences, and people in the Bay Area have a very healthy interest in those.
Well, I'm very interested in tarot. How did you become involved with tarot?
Well, that's right. People like yourself, you know, are getting a lot of enrichment and empowerment out of the divination arts. I personally have been involved with it since I was about 11 years of age. My mother was a renowned, internationally known clairvoyant, and had worked extensively in the United States and India. She was actually from the Himalayas and was known here. But I'm from Belfast, and in Ireland where we lived, there was, as still is going on, and as you probably know, a lot of consciousness problems there, a lot of injustices and so on. And then because we were concerned about that, we had the idea, my mother had the idea, that what would happen if we asked some of the people that she was affiliated with, this is metaphysical academics and people of caliber within the metaphysical sciences, what happens if we could host them perhaps to come to Belfast to alleviate some of these issues, these consciousness problems? So we did. We made contact with Edgar G. Mitchell, Barbara Marx Hubbard, Jerry Jampolsky, Alan Chadwick, Tara Singh, and people like that. And one of the people that my mother was affiliated with was Paul Solomon, the world teacher. And he founded the Fellowship of Inner Light movement, which is now called the Paul Solomon Foundation. Well, one of the people that he had sent over when I was 11, this was back in the 70s, was a woman who came, and she brought with her a tarot deck, an Italian deck, and took us through meditations and took us through reading situations. And I became very aware that this tool, is very powerful, and I decided to get very involved in it because I realized that you can serve humanity with it, and this was my destiny. In fact, in the readings that she gave us at the time, the cards said that I would have some future destiny in that subject. Of course, at 11 years of age, it didn't mean much. It took another 20 years to even get the faintest idea, what that was really all about. But this was our idea, is to bring these kinds of concepts over to Ireland, and then from there I got interested in it, and I realized that the tarot specifically very much affects the human intuition and can help people to strengthen their intuition, and I dedicated myself to having a mission to bring tarot and the divination arts into as many people's lives as I possibly could.
Okay, we keep mentioning the tarot. Some viewers might not know what this is. This is a deck of cards which is larger than the normal 52 card deck. Maybe you can explain that.
Right, exactly. The tarot is the prototype of the 52 cards. If you take out what they call the major arcana, or the major cards, you're left basically with what we have today as the regular playing cards. But the tarot cards themselves are very, very ancient, and they were created about 25,000 years ago in Egypt. There's been different cultures who've had tarot decks and made use of tarot, but the original tarot is Egyptian, from the earliest days of Egypt, and it is 78 cards. And people generally know about tarot because you get a reading from a tarot deck, or somebody who's working with tarot. But there are many other applications. Tarot is connected to sacred geometry, Pythagorean numerology, many other paradigms that are even scientifically orientated. There's people who have made connections to the 78 cards in connection with the periodic table. I'm working with a gentleman right now who has got an interest in that. So there's also a very scientific orientation to these things that might not first strike people because of the way that the divination arts have been habitually presented to us as something sort of fringe and new agey,
And it looks so random.
Right,
just
precisely.
Turning cards over at random. So there's a pure therapeutic connotation with tarot?
Yes, on one level, definitely. That's why the majority of people who recognize tarot is that a good ethical reading, or if you come for a reader, it helps to get focus in your life, to strengthen the intuition, to bring some certainty into daily life, because life is very complex right now, our life, and it's getting more complex all the time, and there's always this emphasis in life to have perfection, to strive towards excellence, and that's kind of hard to do when you're only using one part of the brain, which is the left hemisphere of consciousness, kind of limiting. So people here on the cutting edge who have very, very busy lifestyles have understood that, living a life full of waste and wrong turnings is not the way to achieve excellence. So they have understood that they need to come to balance mentally and have different things in their life that help their consciousness and give them empowerment and enrichment. And divination studies and getting an ethical reading from somebody definitely helps in this, to clear the way, to see exactly where I'm going, to know what cycle you happen to be under. But I think it's a form of healing, actually. And if we tend to take care of what is happening on our inner world, then perhaps we have to take care of our physical health a lot less,
Well, just like advertising agencies, I keyed on the word ethical. So if a person was to find, which I'm sure there may be a number of them, an ethical tarot reader, then why would they want to go?
Yeah.
What would it benefit them if they weren't familiar with the subject?
Right, it's a good question. And what happens is that we are human beings. No matter what your profession or the role in life that you're playing, we're all basically human beings. We have questions, and ultimately we're all here for a specific reason. We are all here with a specific destiny, and very few people today are actually living out their true destiny, the one that they've actually come here to participate in and to further. So, and then what happens is we start living these inauthentic lives, or we start going through these socially vetted roles that we take for our real authentic existence, and they're not. So when you delve into the mysteries, what you're trying to do is get in contact with that part of yourself that is aligned with what I call the universal intelligence, because it is the universal intelligence that will impart to each one of us why we were created, why we're on this planet, and exactly what our role is in regards to humanity. We desperately need to find what this is in order to live a coherent and an ethical life. And I believe that the secret of this is housed in the right brain, or what we call the right hemisphere of consciousness, in what I like to term the wisdom body. It's a sort of inner oracle. And the tarot and divination and astrology and Kabbalah and numerology are merely the external mirrors by which you get into discourse, direct, coherent discourse with that. And of course, when you do, then we are closing the gap on uncertainty. We are shifting the center of gravity towards our own selves. Instead of giving our power away by asking 70% of our questions to other people, we are starting to consult ourselves directly. We always have soft cell questions passing through our mind daily. Minute by minute we have questions passing through the mind. And it's only when we reach a trauma situation that we then focus on a specific question. But then what happens? We come across a question, and then we have the fear, the trepidation, the sort of confusion that goes with, well, how do I answer this? And our habitual method of doing that is to go to the short-term memory, say, well, how did I do this before? How did I get out of a similar problem before? And repeat it. But the problem with that system is that then there's only a hit or miss accuracy through life. There is no development of the wisdom body, and it's very repetitive, and that is one of the reasons why there's a tremendous mediocrity to everything we do. We are not accessing our wisdom body. So people in the Bay Area, of all of the places in the world, you see, California and the Bay Area, people are very driven. They are striving for excellence, and they've come to realize that they can't afford to waste their energies, not in relationships, not in profession, not even in their own inner life. So ultimately the tarot is to do with your spiritual development. I must say that. But its application, because we have very little time in today's life for something that's not totally practical. So there is a practical application of these divination arts, and that's what I specialize in. Yeah.
That's very good. This reminds me of some religious writings I have read where the secret to one's life might be found within themselves, or
Yeah,
the
of
idea
course.
that God has a plan for my life.
Yes.
If only I knew what it was.
Well, the same people that were talking that way, i.e. the Gnostics of the world and the Taoists and the Sufis, they are the ones who created the tarot deck. The tarot is a means to an end. It works basically like any psychological test on a very basic level. It works like any psychological test. And as I said, the ultimate goal of using an ancient science like this is to develop your spirit body, for spiritual reasons. But let it be known that every single human being needs to stop giving their power away, stop going through these socially vetted roles that we then call our lives, and try to ask that fundamental, greater human question of why are we each here? What is our true purpose? And that simply cannot be reached if we are not working with the divine intelligence. That divine intelligence is going to impart that message to us.
Mm-hmm.
But when it is condemning our lifestyles, not condoning it, there's very little chance of us ever finding what that is. And I believe that some of the delinquency that we're seeing amongst the youth, some of the abuses with psychotropic drugs, and all of the delinquency that we're seeing right across the board, and the sense of nihilism that permeates a lot of society right now, is because we are not each individually finding out what our authentic purpose is on this planet. So the divination arts, physical science is not going to answer that. Physical science that is explaining the world, well, that it has a job, but it's not going to deal with that.
So the highest purpose of tarot would be the search for
your true meaning,
true purpose in life.
Now that sounds esoteric, but it's not. The true purpose can be something quite simple, in fact, but the actual coming across of it. Now there are a few people who may drop into what they need to do by accident, shall we say, right? The lucky few who just from the time they're born know exactly what they have to do and pursue it for the rest of their lives, like some of the great film directors and people that you hear about who just knew from point go what they wanted to do. But for the majority of us, that's not the case. And when I was given clearance and guidance from these people, it really impacted me. At 11 years of age, even though I was young, the magic that happened for me that day was so powerful that I made a choice, to study with these masters. And through my mother, I was able to do it, and have the great good fortune to study with some of these mentors, and then to honor them, I continued to do the same thing. But as I do come from Belfast, but my attitude is that you call a place home where the people that have supported your work, your profession, and your rise to wherever you need to go. In Ireland, the tendency there is to shoot you if you're a free thinker. Here, the tendency is to promote you. So there's a little bit different deal there.
I'm afraid the United States might be catching up.
Well, I'll do my bit to make sure that it doesn't.
I'll support that.
Mm-hmm.
So tarot is not a healing tool.
I think it is a healing tool, actually. I think it is a healing tool, but it is a healing tool. Because what happens if we start taking care of our own inner being? Then the chances are we're going to have to take care of our outer health less. It's a simple equation. When you are feeling stress-free and coherent and directional, and I believe after years of working with the tarot and working, I have CEOs and I have top executive people from all of these Bay Area companies and all throughout the world even using the tarot, coming for readings and being involved in these things. It's not just something of the New Age movement. I want to make that very clear. When you work with this, the sense of direction and purpose and enrichment that you get changes your life dramatically, because you start working with the two hemispheres of the brain, not just one. We tend to be hyper involved in the linearistic, masculinized worldview. And the tarot, as I said, comes from the goddess tradition. We may get to talk about that a little later, what the goddess tradition is, but the tarot is one of the products or the tools that was put here in the earliest days of Egypt by the goddess tradition, and it very much is for therapeutic reasons.
Okay, very good. Some people might fear this new information. What do you say to people that
think that this is sinister divination, or those people that come from a different Orthodox background?
Well, I have personally a lot of clients that are Christians, and for instance, they come for readings because, as I said, no matter what we think we are human, and we have the same issues and problems, but they do have that concern in the beginning stages, and they always leave knowing that they have not dishonored their force. And I'd like to remind you also that if you look into the Bible, prediction is just all over the Bible. You have the prediction of the coming of Jesus Christ. You have the prediction Jesus made himself about his own crucifixion, that he would rise again. You have the prediction concerning the raising of the temple. You have the prediction of the birth of Jesus Christ in Bethlehem by the wise man. And in fact, that prediction, they say, stems even from the Old Testament. And some people even say that the whole book of Revelation is nothing but prophecy. So it's not something taboo, and there's nothing sinister about it unless somebody who is the practitioner, brings that kind of energy to the deck or to their work. But there's nothing sinister in the tarot in itself, in my opinion.
Well, there may be some people that have tried to teach tarot or use tarot in the past and have not done a good job, so people become disbelievers, or they say it's a hoax, they say it doesn't work. So there's always going to be skeptics.
Yeah, there will be skeptics, and you can't really, I don't blame them, because there are a lot of people who've used this and they haven't been of the highest integrity, and of course the charlatans proliferate in this particular kind of gnosis, in this kind of study. But if you do your homework, you're going to find out something very interesting, and that is the word tarot. We've been told anyway, that the Bible originates from the 5 books of the Torah. But what we haven't been told is that the Torah originates with the tarot. In fact, they're the same word. It's just a different, there's a slightly different spelling of the vowels. The Bible originates with the books of the Torah, but the Torah originates with the 78 cards of the tarot. And when you do your homework and look into the esoteric tradition, you're going to find this out, that the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet connect to the 22 paths of the Tree of Life, which connects to Kabbalah, which connects to the 22 cards of the major arcana. So there are many secrets, and this has been written about, by the way, extensively. Many of the great scholars, like Robert Graves, and J.J. Bachofen, and Joseph Campbell. This is something that has been spoken of for centuries, so it's absolutely factual. And you see, deep inside of us anyway, we are still fascinated by divination. We just don't know it. When you pick up a coin for luck, when you throw a coin into a well, for luck, when you put candles on the birthday cake, when the queen will, knight somebody with the sword, when you play hopscotch, when
every time I pass a super lotto sign.
Yes, you see this? And many of the things that we do, which come out of the folk tradition, and we just do it innocuously, these are actually vestiges of divination, and you're not going to be able to abolish it. You can no more abolish them than you can say, well, I'm going to stop dreaming at night. These are part of a great world that exists, and it has been relegated to the realm of novelty and pseudoscience, because that was an error. But as I said, many people in the Bay Area, at first you wouldn't think it, there is a great deal of interest in this, because people want to live complete lives, all-rounded lives in which they're becoming symbol literate, because tarot and astrology are really one chapter out of the greater book of symbolism. I do workshops and classes on symbolism, so that's what I say to people if they're a little bit skeptical. I say that these are just one chapter, a very important chapter, but nevertheless just one chapter out of the greater book of symbolism. When you're looking at the tarot, when you're looking into numerology or the runes or any of these traditions, you're becoming symbol literate. And in the Western world, though people like Joseph Campbell, went blue in the face, telling us that we need to be aware of symbolism, we are very behind. And America is also a culprit of this, that we're symbol illiterate. And now children are sitting on television, being inundated with symbols. They think it's chic to dress from head to toe in corporate logos. Now people are spending more time on the data space, being inundated with logos. And this is something that is not altogether positive. And at the New Age Academy in Berkeley, I'm on the staff there. I teach the children every week about this, and about how sacred symbols are sometimes subversively used, subliminally used, and I can see physically the empowerment that comes from that. And then, I also work with adults in a more deeper way, but I have seen what happens when you make people aware of these subjects.
We were talking earlier about symbology being the subject of hopefully a future show.
Oh, I would be glad.
Technology trends,
I think that people really need to get into this, because we are surrounded in our ambiance with these symbols, and we have been taught, through life, we have been taught what to think, but we have not been taught how to think. And there's a complete difference.
Yes.
Parents are teaching their children what to think. You're going to like the Raiders as opposed to that. You're going to vote for this party as opposed to this. This is all what to think. I'm a teacher who teaches people how to think. And this is a completely different slant on things.
How to make their own decisions.
Yes, and how to make your own decisions that are going to avail your karmic life the best way is to be in touch, have the universal order of things which brought us all into existence, right? Which science is now and has proven does exist. When this force is condoning your life, not condemning it, working directly with you, then massive changes take place. And I've seen that happen, and it's a reality. It's an absolute fact. Yeah.
Well, to get back to the tarot deck, we have some cards we'll show in a few minutes, I guess. The tarot deck, you mentioned the major arcana being 22 cards that relate to the 22 paths of the Kabbalah and all of that. I guess I'm thinking of a bridge deck, which is 52 cards, plus the additional 22 would make 74.
Yeah.
Is that the complete deck?
No, there's a few more.
Okay.
Like I say, during the time when the gypsies got hold of the tarot, I mean, the tarot's antique. It goes back very far away, but many of its secrets were lost. But it stayed in our society in one form or another. So the tarot, what we call the playing decks, is similar, and it is still very mystical. It's not a playing deck for having games. It's actually an archetypal divination deck in itself, and you'll have many people who do readings just with the 52 cards, but it is only really a small part of the 78. You need the whole 78 cards, because those cards each relate to aspects of our consciousness. That's what the 22 major arcana are.
Okay. You refer to your work as archetypal taroscopic astrology, but also as Gnostic. What is that?
Yeah, Gnostic. A Gnostic is someone who looks at the core of something, at the seed of something, rather than the periphery. Religions tend to look at things in the periphery. A Gnostic is someone from any religion who seeks to look at the hub of wisdom. But in the context of which we're talking, the Gnostics were the Western world's first depth psychologists. They were the first behaviorists, if you want to look at it that way. So again, you know, to bring it down into very practical terms, they were people who were the first people who studied consciousness. And had they been allowed to have a free say in our world, I believe that our world would be very, very different. But Orthodox religion saw to the fact that they were suppressed. And they honored women. They were also very balanced as far as gender goes. Women had roles of power within the religion of Gnosticism. And as I say, you know, their way of looking at things was very different. For instance, to give you one example, religion, Orthodox religion, fundamental religion, has this idea that you get to the light, or you get to truth, or you get to God by way of conversion. This means that you start off basically as a sinner, as a nothing, and then when they feel like it, you know, they will introduce you to your higher self or to the God.
They will.
They will. Yeah, you know, after they think that you're pure enough and all of that. We see this concept holds no currency whatsoever to Gnostics or to occultists. The Socratic or the shamanistic idea is that you already have the truth within you. It's just in a state of slumber. And then when you are ready, it will be reawakened. And that's a completely different understanding, you know, of the whole thing. And then again, more specifically, to bring up divination, the Gnostics believe in something that I find absolutely fascinating. They say that there's 3 kinds of time. They say that there is what they call clock time, which is obviously measured by a clock or a watch. They say there is seasonal time, which is measured by the calendar. And then there is what they call psychological time. And psychological time is also measured by something. As I said, the first one is measured by a clock, the second one is measured by a calendar, and the third one is measured by what they call the zodiac. And in fact, that is why they all feature 12 units. The clock has 12 hours, the seasons have 12 months, and the zodiac has 12 signs. And it is actually from the zodiac, from what we call sidereal time, that the other 2 came about. So when we are out of touch with the third kind of time, when our psychological time clock is off, that is where all the disempowerment arises in our life. It's like taking off your physical watch and throwing it away for like a month and a half and saying, well, you know, I'm going to try and live my life without it, or pay no attention to the seasonal calendar. I mean, in 2 weeks or 2 days, your life will be in total chaos. You wouldn't be able to, you know, go to your appointments on time. You wouldn't even be able to catch the bus. You'd soon find out that life is pretty difficult, you know, without following those 2 forms of mundane time. Well, if you magnify that predicament, that scenario to the soul context, that is exactly why we are in the state that we're in today. We're just afloat on the ocean of consciousness. Our psyche is on a deeper level. The divination arts and the zodiac, so there's nothing fanciful or unscientific about it. It is the time clock of our personal being. They all feature 12 units. The other 2 that we're familiar with originated from the one, psychological time. So when a person comes for a reading, that's what we're doing. We're recalibrating their inner clock. And the empowerment and the coherence that comes of that is something really to witness, you know, something very good.
Well, there are those that you would explain this to, and then they would say, oh, this is completely unscientific, and this is not modern science. It shouldn't even be in our society today.
Right.
So how would you answer that?
Well, I'd answer them by saying that they wouldn't even have the concept of even having number if it hadn't been for the goddess tradition. The very fact that you can even have a concept of mathematics came about from the goddess tradition and from no other tradition. It was noticed in ancient times that the cycles of the female, the gestative cycle and other cycles, are the link. They noticed that the cosmos was in harmony with the female. And that is why the word Ma, which used to represent mother, or matrix, the ancient goddess of that time was called Mayat. And that is why we get the word mathematics, measure, marriage, matter, for instance. The matter that they're studying, the materialist is studying, is named after the phoneme, or the vowels of the goddess. So I'd say to them that you better watch your step, because actually you couldn't even have a concept of enumeration or geometry. The word geometry comes from Gaia, ometry, the measurement of the goddess. Gaia being the goddess of the earth. So the goddess tradition is the backdrop of all of our science. And people who are in the secret fraternities like the Freemasons and the Knights Templar, they know that. And so if someone in secular society has a problem with that, well, then they need to do their homework.
Well, I can tell you that having gone through lots of schooling myself, this surely is not taught in modern society today. And I know that the Masons that I've known haven't gone into these areas, so maybe this is lost knowledge.
Well, the idea is it's not lost, but they tend to sequester it. They have this idea that it's on a need-to-know basis, and that most of us don't need to know.
Okay.
You know, and I take exception to that. But we do need to know. The time has come. We're in the 21st century, and that we have to return to what I call a stellar paradigm. There was 4 great cults of the ancient world, and the greatest mysteries and the greatest science, be it geometry or numerology, came out of the first cult, many thousands of years ago, called the stellar cult. And I believe that our times now, in the 21st century, are going to see a return to that paradigm, to that reality.
Well, this is all very incredible, because most people, when they think of tarot, they just think it's a card game, random card game.
Well, that's the beauty of it. It seems so simple and so innocuous, and it seems so childlike, you know. And it is because it seems random, but actually it helps you to access the right-hand side of your consciousness. The right hemisphere of consciousness is where your inner wisdom body is housed, and it is a means of getting in touch with that.
Well, perhaps now it's time to actually look at some tarot cards that you have set up, and we can explain the meanings.
Well, sure, because people often ask, you know, how is it exactly? And a skeptic is going to ask this question, and a believer should ask it as well, and that is, how exactly do the cards interact with human consciousness? Well, it turns out that in a tarot deck there are 4 suits: fire, water, air, and earth. And as Carl Jung so clearly pointed out, the 4 suits, fire, water, air, and earth, are symbolized in the tarot by the wands, the cups, the swords, and the discs. And so there are 4 suits, and each one of them represents a modality of consciousness. So they're color-coded. You know, a scientist can immediately see there's a number at the top, so they're number-coded. They're also color-coded to represent the emotional person and your emotional sensibilities, to represent the energy and the persona of a person, you see, and their physical vitality and energies. The swords cards represent your thinking capacity and your interactions with other people and your daily schedules, and also problem solving, the problems you may get into. And then finally, on the left here, on the right, we see the discs, the pentacles. And the discs represent simply your physical, financial life, your status and reputation, your bodily health, and the whole ambiance at work. So they're very practical. And then the different combinations that they fall will give a divination scholar some information. So to rebut the tarot cards as having meaning is the same thing to rebut a guitarist for saying that the strings don't have any meaning and no sound comes out when you play different chords. There are 6 strings, very basic. Everything comes back to basic principles.
So the chords are there if you take the time to learn them.
Precisely, and then it's just a matter of arranging them in different, calibrations, and then you have what we call music. It's the same with the deck. They all work in that beautiful harmonic way. And a more poetic way to look at it is this. I use this analogy quite a lot. If you think of the tarot as a cathedral, the tarot itself as a cathedral, then the cards are like the stained glass windows. Very beautiful, very ornate icons of power. And then the information that comes out of a reading is like the light that comes through those window panes. And the light will be of different intensities. The light will sometimes be of different intensities. And so the expert diviner, somebody who has studied and researched the subject, they can see, well, right now there's not too much light coming through this window, so this is not a priority in this individual's life. Or this window seems very bright, so maybe this is of importance. So it's just like that. It's just a matter of knowing a little bit about them, and it's really not that hard. There is another analogy I can give, is that when you go to the doctor, What does he do? Before you've even hardly opened your mouth, they put the thermometer in your mouth, and they pull out your records. Well, in a reading, the thermometer is the tarot cards, and your record is the chart that the astrologer or the tarot person does. I do what is called a taroscopic chart, which is actually a mixture of Kabbalah, tarot, astrology, and numerology. So you get all the 4 disciplines in one. So that is your chart. And the cards work like a thermometer, only they don't take your physical temperature so much, they take your psychic temperature, what's really going on behind the scenes, including all the other areas of your life, but they take the temperature more of your inner being. You know, so again, very simple to explain, nothing sinister about it, unless a person brings that intention to the cards, you know. Then you have to use that you get in any subject, any role in life, you know. Yeah.
Well, we mentioned the word astrology a number of times. I was taught astrology at an early age by my grandmother, and I always thought it was kind of foo-foo because how could the sun affect myself? But then I learned that there's planets, signs, and houses, lots of combinations. It's very esoteric, very fast.
I think so. And also, I have a serious problem with I must say that astrology as taught today, both Vedic and Western, I do not believe is the original Gnostic astrology. In fact, majority of my work in this country and the treatise that I'm doing is a tour de force. I'm composing partly by way of the internet. I have a mystery school online, and I've founded what I call the archetypal stellar taroscopic astrology, which I believe goes back to the original Egyptian Gnostic astrology. And it is absolutely right. The flaw in Western astrology is that they have this idea that rocks floating in space affect the human consciousness. Nothing could be further from the truth. Consciousness affects matter to a greater extent than the other way around. So, you know, I'm actually composing many works and doing lectures and workshops all over the place based on correcting these errors. In astrology.
I think we've seen all the cards we need to see. Okay. Well, you mentioned classes. Where do you give these classes? How often do they come around?
Well, in Europe, but as the interest is so great in the Bay Area, we've been doing for 4 or 5 years now, steadily in Menlo Park. We do at the Live Oak Center for the Healing Arts, and then Berkeley at the New Age Academy. I spoke at the UFO Expo in August, and I'll be talking there again next May in Seattle. You know, so, and I've done workshops at the Psychic Institute and venues like that, you know, so people can find me around. But my steady gigs are actually in Menlo Park and Berkeley. If people contact me, you know, they can come there for classes, and I make the classes very short and sweet. There's none of these multi-week, high-expenditure classes, you know. When you bring the 4 disciplines together, tarot, astrology, Kabbalah, and numerology are sister disciplines. They've been taught separately, as you hinted, that they've all been taught sort of separately and divisionally. This is absolutely incorrect. They need to be taught together if they're going to have, you know, strength, and if they're going to be able to be learned at all. So I teach them all together in a very short 7-week class. So you're talking a very brief period of time. In fact, I have people taking my class to prove that can't be done. And then to their shock, they actually find that in 2 or 3 classes, I am able to do that. So, you know, the glue that holds them together has been lost or it has been forgotten, as you said earlier, but there is a glue that holds them together, and once you find that, then you have the correct way. Then they work symbiotically, synergistically, and there's a way to transmit them very powerfully. And my methodology also includes teaching you your own chart first, because too many books today in this subject are coldly written. They're written like a manual for a card game.
So the chart means the astrological birth chart?
No, not quite. It's what we call the taroscopic chart, which includes astrology, but not quite the Western style. It's basically my own. After years and years of researching, I've discovered a Gnostic paradigm that unites the 4 sister disciplines, and I show you how to do your own chart. And there's many wrong ways, and only one right way of doing that, and it has to do with the tarot. In my own studies, I found that the tarot, the precepts and the operations and procedures that you use when you're dealing with the tarot on an esoteric level contain many, many secrets that have been lost to the other disciplines. In the same way that an archaeologist will piece together a vase, you know, from little shards. That's what I've done. And when I was doing it, I didn't know what the final edifice was going to look like. I did it without any partisan belief or, you know, or any prejudice. I just was putting together, after years of researching psychology and mysticism and Pythagorean mathematics and cosmology, sacred geometry, and astrology, I was able to bring together this artifact, which is very, very powerful. And people, you know, the testimonials, if people want to visit my website, taroscopes.com, they'll see the testimonials of people who've taken my classes from all walks of life, both in the media and in corporate structures, and just, you know, teachers and business persons and homemakers, all sorts of people, you know.
Okay.
Yeah.
And they don't have to have any previous knowledge about esoteric or ancient subjects?
If they do, fine, and in a way it's probably better that they don't, because it's like my driving instructor said. He goes, "Have you ever driven a car before?" And I said, "No," and he goes, "Well, good, then you probably haven't learned any bad habits."
Huh.
Right, so, you know, in a way, my classes are designed for beginners or students. Anybody who has, got expertise in it will learn something from my classes. I've had people who've been part of Hebrew seminaries who have a deep, abiding interest in the Kabbalah. Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
I always have people who will come to my classes after they hear what I talk about. Numerology. It's fascinating. I teach a thing called the personal timeline, which helps you get connected with this thing we call the psychological time clock within you. I have psychologists, people who want to start profiling their clients through using the 4 suits of the tarot. Remember, we said that each of them rules Jung's 4 types. So I have people now who've done that. I have some scientists. There's 3 people in my class at the moment. One of them worked for SRI. Another one is working for, I think it was, it was Lockheed. I've had people a guy who worked for Genentech in the last, so I mean, this is something that maybe some people have as a hobby, or other people have a fascinating interest in the aesthetics. The cards are very beautiful. That's how I first get interested in them, just the beauty, just the aesthetics of the cards. So I have artists, I have teachers, I have a person who's doing a doctorate thesis on art using the tarot as a means of navigation through the different genres of art. So there's hundreds of applications. Nobody, they can streamline their own application. Sure, I teach divination, but there's no limitation. There's no reason why somebody should just stick to that. They'll find many applications of the deck.
Okay. And for the audience, we will have your email address and website up at the end of the show. They can copy it down at that time.
Thank you.
Back to this God and Goddess concept. I've noticed myself that almost all the major religions, probably all the major religions, come from the principle of God and Goddess.
Yeah.
And we've been talking a lot about Goddess energy running through the tarot cards.
Yeah.
Would you like to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I would. The word, the Goddess tradition, as I said, was we had a matriarchal tradition back in what we call the stellar period, or the stellar epoch, or the stellar cult, whatever you like to talk about it. And in fact, we need to look no further than the name tarot. The name tarot, or tarot, is Egyptian word, and about 25,000 years ago, it's really primordial. Way back there, the original mother goddess was called Tarut. T-A-R-U-T. T-A-R-U-T. Yeah.
So tarot is T-A-R-O-T.
So vowels change through time. But if you actually look at Egyptian language, Latin, and Greek, I believe, and Hebrew, don't even use vowels at all, you see. So vowels tend to be interchangeable, whereas consonants stay the same for many thousands of years. So the word Tarut, or tarot, is actually the name of the goddess. Now, in more... that goddess has been called by various names ever since. She later became Isis, Mat, the goddess Nuth. She was known as Hathor in Egypt. Coming down more into the Christian era, she was known as Sophia in the Gnostic tradition. Then she was known as Circe in the Grecian tradition. And then finally coming down into the Christian era, she's known as Mara, or Mary, the Great Madonna.
Oh, I've heard of that.
Yes, but the original Madonna was Tarut. And when later on in Anglo-Saxon periods, tarot, which is a strong sounding word, was softened. They softened it with an H at the end. So the word tarot became called taroth, or taruth, from which we get the familiar word truth. Yeah, so etymology is one of these great subjects we go into in my classes. Truth and tarot are the same word. And then finally, down more into modern times, the 2 strong T's at the end and beginning of the word tarot got softened to CH. So instead of T, it was Ch. And when you change the 2 T's at the end of tarot, you get charoch, from which we get the word church. So tarot is the original word that when softened, you get the word charuch, or church. And a church is obviously a place where you go to find out the great mysteries of being, right? Well, what do you know? If a prototype of a church was the tarot, this is where it comes from. The origin of the word thought goes back to Thoth, which goes back to tarot. The idea of truth goes back to tarot. So this is something that people have not looked at clearly, and it's absolutely fascinating.
I was going to break in and say that my scientifically trained mind in modern society says, no way, you're making this up.
No, it's a simple fact. If you study the great etymologists of the world, like Gerald Massey and Robert Graves, people of inestimable caliber in these matters, you will find that this is an absolute fact, that consonants have a tendency to change, but vowels change, but consonants tend to stay the same. And in fact, that is one of the reasons why the clergy refer to the church as Holy Mother Church. Has anybody ever wondered why they refer to that? Why they even dress themselves up in robes, flowing female robes? You only have to study the symbolism, and you will find that the reason why they call the church the Virgin Mother, or Holy Virgin, or Holy Mother Church, is because they know what you don't know, and that is that the word originates from the name of the goddess in the earliest times of Egypt. Most of Christianity and Judean Christianity is based on Egyptian symbolism. And this, as I said, has been documented in reference works that are in the libraries, and people can go and don't take my word for it. And if they want to visit my website, there's extensive etymological information there going back to a subject that I also teach throughout America called astrotheology. Astrotheology, or sidereal mythology, which is the complete study of the cults. The stellar cult, the lunar cult, the solar cult, which is what we're in right now. The Christian idea comes out of a solar paradigm, and then what we call the Saturnian cult. Now, historians will not touch this. This stuff has been sequestered. You're not going to hear about it, and that's not by chance that you won't. The cults. The study of cults.
Was
the Saturnian cult.
Saturnian.
Yeah.
Saturn.
Cult of Saturn. Yeah. Which is why you still go and worship on Saturn's Day, Saturday, or Sun's Day. There's many things in our society that still harken back to these cults, but you're not going to hear about it officially, because the study of astrotheology and the man who originated this study is called Jordan Maxwell. For 40 years he'd been studying it, and I'm an associate of his, and both he and I are trying to bring back this sequestered gnosis. And the reason why people have not heard about it is because it lays bare the occult roots of government and religion and big business. So I lecture on this very widely, and I have people from all walks of life come to hear this, because as a lot of people have heard of astrology, a lot of people have heard of astronomy, but not a lot of people have heard about the parent subject from which these two come, which is astrotheology. And astrotheology means exactly what it says, the theology or the religion of the stars. You know, I tell people in my class that it's about time that we start to notice how much Sabian or stellar or sidereal symbols surround us all over the place. And the most famous star of all is the sun. So just try to observe, we're driving down the road, how many solar symbols are used, and many other stellar symbols are used all over the place in all areas of life.
The most elementary symbols to most people might be numbers. Are there also
absolutely,
goddess energy and numbers somehow?
Yes, there are. The 10 planets connect to the 10 numbers. Numerology is very deep. As I said, numeration, when they had understood that the goddess was when they understood that the cycles of the female were in complete symbiosis with the universe, they didn't take this lightly. They thought this was amazing. And so they started to realize that when they would measure forth the universe, when they would start to ask questions about enumerating and delineating the earth and delineating the universe, they never forgot that this technology was brought to them from the goddess worship. And therefore there was 3 personifications of goddess. The first one was the female body, obviously the individual female body. That's the first one. The second one was the earth on which we live, because they saw that as a perfect analog of the female. It's abundant, it gives forth life. But the third and the most important manifestation or personification of the goddess was actually the night sky.
That's Nut.
The night sky, with Nut, the goddess of the darkness, the goddess of the night. And especially the night sky, the zodiac. The zodiac and the 12 houses and the 10 planets. The zodiac specifically was called the girdle of Isis, or the scroll of Isis. You know, you'll often see the Madonna in Renaissance paintings with a scroll unfurling from her. It all goes back to this idea that the zodiac was the scroll of fate. You know, roulette wheels are based on it. Putting candles on a birthday cake and then cutting that birthday cake into geometrical segments is based on the signs of the zodiac, and a candle for each sign of your life. You know, we do these things all over the time. Hopscotch is based on the Kabbalah, the tree of life. You know, I mean, you wouldn't believe it when you start getting into it. How many things we do when you go and get the medals at the Olympic Games, they're given to you all upon an Egyptian pyramid. You know, so people who are very unfamiliar with this, because we're very left brain and we're highly trained and scientific and everything, they're going to think that this is meaningless. But as your eyes are opened, you know, Conan Doyle said so many times, when you want to hide something, you put it in plain sight.
But now the goddess idea is kind of in a decline in this society.
Yeah, in the solar cult. But see, I believe, and I've certainly had it proved to me from being in this country, that as we enter into the 21st century, there is a paradigm shift taking place, and it's not the one that the scientists are talking about. It's another one in which we start to visit the roots of tradition. Because there's 2 ways to account for reality. One is the scientific, the physical, and then there's the alchemical. What I teach is alchemy. Alchemy raises the human being to the divine level. Science has a tendency to reduce the God level or the divine to the human. The two ways of looking at this paradigm is that science is saying, well, just give us some more time. Tomorrow we'll have all the answers. Just tomorrow, just tomorrow, just tomorrow. And science is concerned with facts. I agree with that.
Reproducible facts.
Reproducible facts. But see, the argument that I have, and it might sound strange to say it, is that facts are not always truth. Because it's a fact that the bumblebee shouldn't fly, but the truth is it does.
Absolutely.
It's a fact a couple of hundred years ago, or what have you, that the Earth was flat. Well, the truth is it's not. It's a sphere, right?
There's no water on the moon.
Right. That's a fact too, I guess, right? And then they say it's a fact that there is no higher intelligence in the universe. But guess what? The truth is there is a higher intelligence in the universe. The fact is that we're living in a closed, universal, system. What the fact is, that's the fact. But the truth is, no, it's not. So this is what I'm saying. So my approach is that science is just one way of looking at reality. Another way to look at it, another way to even answer our problems, is to kind of look back to the roots, to the foundation. Our ancestors did it right the first time. What we forget is that they were in perfect harmony with the universe. For all of the people who are talking about the modern technology, they can't build a pyramid to this day. They have not delineated all of the physical illnesses that happen in the body. So, there's many things that they haven't. We can't even get into a situation where women are honored, or children are honored in our society. Right. For all the isms that have happened since the industrial age, how come we're still finding so much delinquency amongst the youth? So for all the isms of this ism and that ism, socialism, globalism, feminism, communism, capitalism, well, how many isms are you going to have before we realize that it just isn't working? Our ancestors were in harmony. They were close to the flora and the fauna. They lived in balance. They understood that there is no separation between your individuality and the supreme. The universal order and the inner order are one.
No separation between man and God.
No, none at all. In fact, that separation is merely an illusion. It's like what Tennyson said, it is like a bent stick, a straight stick that seems bent when you put it into water.
Yes.
Yeah, so, and we are now getting back to this, I think, that as we return full circle through the four great cults, people are getting fed up with this whole solar cult paradigm of hyper-atrophication of the feminine. But see, we've been brought up to believe that when you talk about the yin energy or the feminine energy, that there's something passive and something weak and something demure about that. Well, you bring any Taoist person in here, or any even martial artist, and they will assure you that the yin energy is not weak. We've been brought up to believe it is, but the yin energy is actually the energy that sustains the universe, and it's not weak. But on a very grassroots level, because I deal with grassroots, philosophies, how are we going to make that step? How are we going to get daily involved in this? How are we going to bring that force simply and easily into our lives? I believe that the divination arts, especially the tarot, when you start to learn some of its operations, and it doesn't take long, and you get interested in these subjects and some of the other, satellite studies that go with it, like etymology and astrotheology and sacred geometry, a tremendous shift of awareness. I love this statement by Marcel Proust. He says that the real journey of discovery lies not in seeking new lands, but in seeing with new eyes.
And growing oneself.
Yeah. So all I do is try to help people to see with new eyes,
Well, what's the role then of the old Orthodox religion in this new way of thinking?
Well, as I said, to me, personally, I'd like to see it go, is what I'd personally like to see, because I think that it's done nothing. We've had 2,000 years of Orthodox religion, and it hasn't really done anything but cause dissension and disturbance. I saw a bumper sticker recently that said, "Oh God, save me from those who call yourselves your followers." So I have no concern about Orthodox religion. I think that it has at its core very powerful principles. There's no question about that. But how many people really live to that today? There are three ways of counting for reality. There's the religious Orthodox approach, which will always take care of the masses. Then there's the philosophical, which the people of intellect are going to ask, dialectical questions they're going to get interested in. And then the third way is mysticism, or metaphysics. Metaphysics is the third way that you start to account for reality, but that is based on your personal experience. So being a Gnostic, being from the shamanistic tradition, my forefathers go back in an unbroken line, back to the in India. Yeah, my mother's side goes back in an unbroken line of ascetics and free thinkers and mystics. So I don't come from any other, discipline or world. Mm-hmm. I don't come from the art world specifically, or the business world, or computer world. I am a person who has studied the metaphysics. That's the world I come from. I teach ancient subjects, yes, but I also teach them in the ancient way. You know, people know that there's a lot of people out there teaching the metaphysical subjects, but there's a difference. There's some people who can teach it in the ancient way, and that needs to be experienced. And I'm fortunate enough to be able to do that.
And it not only increases one's intellect, but also one's growing into one's self, their life purpose or their God purpose.
Oh yeah, like I said, we are being pushed always for greater excellence, for seeking perfection on all levels of our life. And we simply cannot afford the wastage of getting into problems and not knowing how to deal with it, and having these breakdowns of empowerment, and then also giving our power away to the authority structures. You know, if people only get one thing out of listening to this broadcast, I'd like them to know that we are all each our own priests and our own priestesses. You don't need any external authority. Maybe between when you're young, you're going to need those authority figures for steadying action. Naturally, you're going to need it. But the time comes when we are ourselves our priests and priestesses, and we spent 2,000 years giving that power away. Now, I come from a Celtic, Druidic background. You know, my mother was from the Himalayas of India, my father is from Ireland. You know, that's a strange combination, but
powerful.
Yeah, but then when you really do your homework, you'll find that the Druidic connection and the Vedic connection are very connected. In fact, the word Edda, which is the sacred books of the Scandinavians, and the word Veda come from the same term. They're both holy books, and they're just slightly different pronunciations of the same thing. They both mean secret or hidden wisdom. And the Celtic peoples can be traced right back to the Indies, to the different invasions, and sure, there's a big connection there. You know, the Aran sweaters and some of the sailboats that are still used in Ireland go back to the Copts and back to India. I've noticed, for instance, that the pentatonic scale is found in Egypt as the same as in Ireland. You know, I find, people who think the Irish harp, that harp is the symbol of Ireland. That is not an Irish harp. That is actually King David's harp. It comes from the Israelite tradition. You know, so many of the symbols that came from my country actually are ancient symbols coming out of the Middle East. And it has to do with the movement of these cults and the interrelationship of these cults. St. Patrick on his mountain and talking about the serpent race, and he's going to banish the serpents from Ireland. There's a hidden story behind all of that. And we need to start revisiting our roots in order to get clearance and understanding. And
this is very fascinating to me, because for those that know me, I'm very much into personal growth, for each person to find their own truth, to grow within themselves, to bring the data within, process it, grow yourself, and do not be subject to authority.
Yes.
It's kind of like the spirit of America back in the old 1770s.
I totally agree with that, and I feel that there's not an accident that I came here, because I'm part of the Krishnamurti tradition, and anyone who's familiar with Krishnaji's teaching will know that he says that you have to get free of these authority structures, because there is an essence within each of us that we need to be consulting on a daily basis. You know, and there's people like yourself who are very much interested in personal growth and self-help, and they need to take it into their own hands and not get vetted or circumscribed by any specific pat philosophy. You know, and be broad-minded and try to realize that you have an inner living zodiac within you. One of the things we talk about is the 3 kinds of time. What we didn't say is that the Gnostics think, and they understood, that we have a living zodiac inside of us. The astrologers still haven't got to this understanding. They think it's floating rocks affect your consciousness. Nothing could be further from the truth. We are all a walking, living, breathing zodiac. That's what I teach. That's the approach I get. And I can tell you, it's a very enriching experience, both for me and for the people that, I've come into contact with.
Well, we have about a minute left to sum up here. I guess I'd like to say that I have, in my life, learned that it's much easier to swim with the river instead of against it.
Absolutely.
So if these arts can help a person find out which way that river flows within themselves, then this would be a great benefit. So these do that.
Right. I think so. California and America in general, it says in the Constitution that all religions, all philosophies will be tolerated and allowed to flourish. I've been affiliated with different Sufi organizations, with the Rosicrucian Order, with wonderful traditions, the Paul Solomon Fellowship, and all of these metaphysical mystery schools exist. And people just have to realize that they have control over their own lives to seek out the great mysteries of their own being, and that might take them into at what first seem, strange areas, but there's an enriching and magical experience waiting for there. It's all about bringing a little bit of magic back into our lives.
Okay, well, for those that wish to contact you, we'll have your information up on the screen in just a moment.
Well, I'll be glad for that.
This is extremely fascinating. I'm very glad that people are still teaching the ancient traditions, which may be very useful for society today. To contact Michael Tsarion, Michael, would you want to give the information, please?
Oh, sure. If people want to get me by phone, then the number is Bay Area 223-3304. And they can also reach me by email because I check that regularly. That's neter, N-E-T-E-R, at jps.net. And neter, by the way, is an Egyptian word from which we get nature. So N-E-T-E-R. And then also, if they're interested more in the background and different things that I do, more of my research and work, they can certainly check out the website, taroscopes.com. There's a lot of fine information there. We put a lot of energy into it. And people can check out some of the other interesting things. And there's all these contact numbers are on that website.
This is very, very fascinating. We certainly hope to be able to have you talk about other subjects as well, perhaps the astrology part or the symbolism especially.
Well, astrotheology is another subject that I think is very interesting.
And hopefully we'll be able to do that here in future on Technology Trends. And if you would, could you read that address for further information on Technology Trends?
Yes, certainly. Technology Trends is contacted through P.O. Box 487. That's in Mountain View, California, 94042.
Okay, well, thank you, Michael. This is extremely fascinating, and it blends together all the things that I've been interested in myself. Real astrology, planet signs and houses, as well as tarot, as well as ancient Egypt science,
it's
forgotten
inclusive.
science.
Totally inclusive. We've been living in a world that has too much exclusivity. We need to get back to including all manners of things. This is the variety that we should be in the 21st century. It's not excluding and not decompartmentalizing. Decompartmentalization is terrible even in academic circles. It's certainly absolutely intolerable in metaphysical. Metaphysical is all about bringing together, holism, unification.
And anything that can bring out the true God essence within each of us to come to our own purpose of life and self-knowledge.
And that is not as hard as people think it is. It's not an overwhelming task. It's something very simple. And the reason why we're already not at that stage is because we have been prevented from getting there by the institutionalized forces, both in politics, government, and religion that exist around us.
Very, very good. Hope to see you very soon.
That's a pleasant experience. Thank you very much.
This is our show for today, and thank you for being with us here on Technology Trends.